We're only a couple of days now without NHL hockey, and there's already lots and plenty of talk around what might happen when the league comes back. What kind of playoff format will we see or could we see? Today we're going to discuss some potential options that the league might be looking at. We'll take a look at some potential playoff formats coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. I certainly hope you're all doing well to cope without NHL hockey. I know it's been tough over the last few days. For somebody who lives in Canada, this Saturday night of having no hockey night in Canada as I record this video is certainly, kind of sad, kind of depressing. But at the same time here, we need to try to move on and hopefully things can resume normalcy sometime here in the near future. Of course, this video probably won't make it onto YouTube until Sunday morning. But either way, it's certainly been tough here the last couple of days. Not only is there no hockey, there's no sports, there's just, life as we know it has completely changed over the last little while. So I thought it might be fun to talk about some potential playoff formats and things we might see and get some updates on the league and where things might be going here as the league starts looking at options to resume play once things are safe to do so. Now, we've seen different updates from various NHL insiders, including Elliot Friedman. Friedman's been talking quite a bit about different conference calls and meetings that the league's been having, looking at some different options. I know they're probably looking at possibly trying to open up maybe like the practice facilities in a few weeks' time, but that's not for sure that they're going to be able to do that. But right now, all NHL players are being asked to basically self-isolate. There's word that they're working on trying to figure out getting practice facilities opened up. Like I said, maybe in a few weeks' time. Once the NHL is able to resume, there's talk they might do like a quick mini training camp, possibly for approximately a week to make sure players are back into game shape or close as they can be to that, to make sure that they're able to play up to their standards, and then go from there. Now the league has gone on record to say that they're very interested at this point to being able to complete the regular season and go into the playoffs and award the Stanley Cup. Of course, that's something they want to do. May not be possible. It's really difficult to say. There's a lot of unknowns as the league, waits for things to kind of take their progress here and see where everything goes. As a lot of it's going to depend on how much time that they do lose. Now, there's a couple of different playoff formats though that are being discussed for when they come back. Obviously, one of them very well could be that maybe they don't have time to play any more regular season games and they have to jump right into a playoff format. For example, if they are able to have to wait longer than they're hoping for to resume action. So, for example, if they were to do that, many believe that they would likely go by point percentages because not all teams have an equal number of games played. If they were to do that, and obviously some teams that are eliminated from the playoffs officially now, their season more likely would be over. And here's how the playoffs will look to get things kicked off. In the Eastern Conference, we'd have the Boston Bruins battling the New York Islanders in round one. We'd have the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Toronto Maple Leafs in the 2-3 spots in the Atlantic doing battle. In the other side of the bracket here in the Eastern Conference, we'd have the Washington Capitals battling the Carolina Hurricanes, and we'd have the Philadelphia Flyers battling the Pittsburgh Penguins in that 2-3 matchup from the Metro. Of course, that means, unfortunately, that Columbus, Florida, and the New York Rangers, who are all close and kind of knocking on the door, and really, if they were able to play out the string of the regular season games, they certainly would have a legitimate chance at maybe bumping one of those lower-ranked teams and getting in. But if they were to do that based on point percentages and start the playoffs upon being able to resume the season, then that's where things would stand. Now, of course, over in the Western Conference, here's how the playoff matchups would line up. You'd have the defending Stanley Cup champions St. Louis Blues doing battle with the Calgary Flames, and then you'd have the 2-3 matchup from the Central being the Avalanche versus the Dallas Stars. Of course, the other division here, we have the Vegas Golden Knights would do battle with the Nashville Predators in round one, and then we'd have an all-Canadian matchup of the Edmonton Oilers doing battle with the Vancouver Canucks. So that puts other teams that are knocking on the door and really close, like the Winnipeg Jets, the Minnesota Wild, and the Arizona Coyotes would all be on the outside looking in. So that certainly would be something interesting to take a look at, but there's no guarantee that that's how things would go. But there's lots of ideas here. The other good part about this is that we could see an expanded playoff format. It might not be something we see on a regular basis moving forward, but there is a possibility that they could do it this year rather than just do what I just said. They could do like a play-in type of format, which is something that Elliot Friedman was alluding to, what we've seen here before, which could include around 20 teams, maybe even more, but I think 20 teams is basically what he explained, and I think makes sense if they were going to do that type of thing. Let's take a look at how that would work here, starting with the Eastern Conference. These teams would basically be ranked currently 7 through 10, so they would include the 2 teams in the wildcard spots as of right now, and then the 2 right directly below that. And of course, this is all based on point percentages here as well, so it's not going to look exactly how the NHL standings did as of the last night that the games were played. Just because of the difference in games played, we have to go by point percentages here to be fair. That would set up first round matchups of Florida versus Carolina and Columbus versus the New York Islanders in the East. Now, of course, they would likely go with one of 2 different formats. They could go with a 2-game series, and regardless of the outcome, they could go with best goal differential during the 2 games. They could also choose to do a best 2 out of 3, or they could even just do a single game elimination format as well. Either way, it gets more teams in there with at least one playoff game. They could possibly choose to do them all in one location and not do like a home and away series just to cut down the amount of travel, which would also cut down the amount of time it would take to get these games in, depending on when the schedule can resume as well. So of course, with those 4 teams battling out, of course 2 would move on, which would basically become your wildcard teams like we have normally, which would set up round 2, which would include the lower ranked seed from those play-in games would play the Boston Bruins. Then we'd have the Leafs versus the Lightning. Then the higher ranked team out of those 4 teams who ends up winning would then play the Washington Capitals. And then we'd have the Pens versus the Flyers. So the 2-3 seeds would essentially be the same as before, except that would take place in round 2. Round 1 would just be a play-in style of game with 4 lower-ranked teams trying to fight their way in. Now, in the Western Conference, that would set things up as the Minnesota Wild versus the Nashville Predators and the Winnipeg Jets versus the Calgary Flames. So as I mentioned, there's 2 or 3 different ways they could go about doing the series. It could be a single elimination game. It could be a 2-game series where they go by goal differential, or it could be a best 2 out of 3. Then, of course, both of those would present 2 winners to move on, which essentially becomes your wildcard teams for what we're used to now. That would give us the lower ranked team out of those 4 that win to go on and play the Cup champion, the St. Louis Blues. Then you have the Dallas Stars versus the Colorado Avalanche, a 2 versus 3 set. The higher ranked teams out of the 2 that won versus the Vegas Golden Knights. And then, of course, you still got Vancouver versus Edmonton, and then you move on from there. So it gets more teams in the playoffs, gets a little bit extra revenue, since obviously all these teams are losing money right now due to no games, no attendance, no gate revenue, no merchandise at the arenas at least. So certainly there's a lot of money being lost, and that very well could be impacted as well, which we may do a separate video on discussing further. But I know that's certainly going to have an impact on the salary cap. We already got our recent projection here at the NHL GM meetings, which was not long before the NHL had to suspend play. But if they're not able to recoup and get these games played from the regular season or restart things up to play out the remaining games, the league as a whole could end up losing about $1 billion, which is pretty substantial, which is going to have a major impact on the cap, which could really have a major impact on some of these teams that are really needing a boost in the salary cap to be able to get their business in order without having to make some major lineup changes and trades, etc., to become cap compliant for next year. And obviously the league and its players will end up having to likely come to a set agreement earlier on than usual for next year as well. But a lot of that's going to be determined once they know the fate of the current season. So clearly, there's some different formats at play. The NHL, like I said, has made it known that they're open to ideas. They want suggestions, and a lot of what they do and how they execute it is going to depend on when they can resume play. But based on what we're hearing, it sounds like if all goes well, it might be about a 30-day pause, maybe by middle of April or so. If everything went well, if they were able to reopen some practice facilities and get their players training, it probably would start off with empty arena games. I can't see anything changing that quickly where they'd be able to allow actual NHL fans in attendance, but it could result in games being played. Now, of course, if games are played to an empty arena, that's still going to get a lot of lost revenue, but it would help create some revenue in a sense, because at least games can be broadcast and things like that. But either way, major impact on the sport, going to have a major impact on the salary cap. But for today, we're trying to look at some positive, fun things in some playoff formats. So out of the ones I've mentioned here, I'd like to see what your thoughts are. Which one do you prefer? What do you think the NHL's best course of action would be to go with a playoff format here once they're able to resume playing? Because either way, we know that the season is going to be delayed, which is going to cause a shorter period of time to get things done without extending the season too long. But I know it might be tough to say what you prefer based on not knowing when they're going to start back up. But the other option, of course, as well, is if things are delayed too long, could we even maybe see a March Madness bracket style of formats where we have a lot of teams competing and having it be like a single elimination format? Friedman did mention that idea as well. It's kind of a cool idea. You could maybe even have like one site be the main place where all the games are played, or maybe just a couple of sites, so there's limited amount of travel for all these players. Do a March Madness bracket, maybe one site in the East, one in the West, and then create maybe a third for the final or something like that. I don't know how they would do it exactly, but either way, there's certainly some very creative ideas that can be put to use here to make an exciting playoff run once they're able to resume playing. And I'd love to know what your thoughts are and which one you think would be the best course of action once that happens. So of course, once we get going here in the next few days, we're going to kind of resume some of the different off-season series that we discussed before. So there will be regular daily videos coming here soon, and we'll be some posts here on the community tab likely coming to get your ideas as well, because I have lots of different series we can take a look at here and keep going, and just want to get some feedback on maybe the order that we do things. So stay tuned for some polls coming on the community tab and some community posts here, looking for subscriber feedback to kind of make sure I'm delivering the content that you want during this NHL hiatus. So that is all for today. Make sure you leave your comments down below on the playoff format. And of course, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and hit your notification bell so you don't miss any future content. Even though there's not real live time gameplay you can watch on TV, there's still lots of discussions that can be had in this community. And I'll do my best to provide lots of daily content here so we can kind of get our hockey fix in and still talk plenty about the sport that we all love and are passionate about. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.